This is a special report by Infowars.com's reporter, Dan Bidondi. And today we're going to dissect the Miac report, known as a Missouri Information Analysis Center Strategic Report of February 20th of 2009. Report, you're going to see the federal government demonizing militia movements, Ron Paul supporters, Second Amendment activists, anti-abortionists, anti-New World Order. Anybody that stands for liberty, they demonize as potential domestic terrorists. Also returning veterans at that. In this document, you got the U.S. government stating that there's a huge surge in the militia movement, a huge surge in liberty groups, due to overwhelming conspiracy theories and rhetoric, such as the talks of a New World Order, foreign troops being trained here in America for martial law, U.S. troops confiscating American citizens' guns, RFID implants, and so on. In this video, we're going to cover what the government classifies as conspiracy theory and rhetoric, and we're going to show you news articles and documents stating, no, this is not conspiracy, this is not rhetoric. And this is the reason why true American citizens are taking up action against the dictatorship of this federal government. Start this off first with a news article followed by a video showing that, yes, foreign troops are here in America, are taking part in exercises to confiscate American citizens' guns in preparation for martial law. In this article here from Infowars.com reporting that foreign troops to confiscate Americans' guns under UN treaty. Now this is just one of many articles that you could find that declares that, yes, foreign troops are being trained here to confiscate American citizens' guns and also in preparation for martial law. And now, watch the following video.
Beginning in October, the Army plans to station an active unit inside the United States for the first time to serve as an on-call federal response in times of emergency. The 3rd Infantry Division's 1st Brigade Combat Team has spent 35 of the last 60 months in Iraq, but now the unit's training for domestic operations. The unit will soon be under the day-to-day control of U.S. Army North, the Army service component of Northern Command. The Army Times reports this new mission marks the first time an active unit has been given a dedicated assignment to Northern Command. The paper says the Army unit may be called upon to help with civil unrest and crowd control. The soldiers are learning to use so-called non-lethal weapons designed to subdue unruly or dangerous individuals and crowds.
Is it far-fetched to imagine that these UN peacekeeping forces would be used against American citizens? The 502nd, another unit from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, is shown here arriving as peacekeepers in Somalia, wearing their UN blue berets and UN insignia. Shortly thereafter, this same unit, the 502nd, was in Arkansas practicing house-to-house searches and seizures in a joint UN training mission called Agile Provider in the spring of 1994. Agile Provider involved 44,000 UN troops, including troops from France and the Netherlands, training in the states of Georgia, North and South Carolina, Arkansas, and Tennessee. Yes, UN troops have been trained in this country in the past, but not in brigade strengths and not in domestic support house-to-house searches and seizures. Many of our congressmen deny that UN troops are being trained in this country at all, but as you can see in these clips from Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, Germans were training here last spring.
Das ist die Baracke 1660, die da vom zweiten Zug hinschollen,
UN training has become so widespread that many of the newspapers around the country have had at least one such story.
As you just witnessed, foreign troops are being trained here in the United States. Our Second Amendment and our sovereignty is under great threat. And if you're still not convinced that the military does not confiscate guns, now you're going to see National Guards in New Orleans confiscating American citizens' guns, legal gun owners.
That includes New Orleans, where today authorities stepped up their efforts to empty the city. Bob Woodruff is there again tonight with an extraordinary human drama unfolding. Bob?
That's true, Elizabeth, and good evening from New Orleans. Here, the police and the National Guard find themselves in a very difficult position tonight to try to carry out an order to force people from the city without actually using force.
Today in New Orleans, they got a lot tougher on the holdouts.
Police department, anyone home?
Not only the flooded areas, but New Orleans' driest and wealthiest neighborhoods, too.
Police department!
The police and National Guard going street by street, house to house.
We need to make sure, too, that whenever we knock on doors, people refuse to leave. We need to make note, call it in.
They say there are no orders to use force, just strong persuasion, sometimes entering open houses with guns drawn, and instructions to disarm anyone inside.
You say guns will be taken?
Yeah, no one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
That happened today in this wealthy neighborhood where homeowners had armed themselves to protect their mansions. Residents were handcuffed on the ground. In the end, police took their weapons but let them stay in their homes.
They were a little bit threatened because our weapons were bigger than their weapons.
For many of the police and guard troops, it is an uncomfortable job to do this in an American city. This guard unit occupied a church, using it as a base camp. They had to leave a note because they could not get hold of the pastor to get permission.
It is surreal. Yeah, you never expect to do this in your own country.
Chris Montgomery says he'd rather be in Iraq than patrolling American neighborhoods.
Walking up and down these streets, you don't want to think about the stuff that you're gonna have to do. Somebody pops around the corner.
You mean shoot in America?
Yeah.
Well, I don't want you in here.
We're not gonna do that.
I don't want you in here, period.
But there's a mandatory evacuation.
I know all about it.
Well, Patricia Coney's protests were to no avail. They moved her out of there, and she is now out of the city.
It's contaminated with bacteria that you and I, even a tenth of what it contains, we would not be allowed to go to the beaches, let's say in South Jersey or in Long Island. So this is a big public health, and it's very risky for everybody around.
Yeah, but this woman she doesn't want to leave, and there's no reasoning with her. But what could happen if individuals stay in an atmosphere of fetid water? Are they going to get a disease, and will they pass that disease to others? Is that possible?
Well, 100% they're going to get sick. I mean, if they eat or consume any water that has been contaminated...
But they're going to say, no, I'm going to boil my water, I'm not going to go into water, leave me alone.
Well, it just doesn't happen. I mean, the facts are the facts. Even if you boil the water...
Now, as you just seen, that no, it's not a conspiracy theory or rhetoric that military confiscate American citizens' guns. Katrina was not the first, and Katrina will not be the last. The following section is called the Noteworthy Militia Activity from 1995 to 1999, then 2000 to 2008, showing a list of previously crimes committed, such as attempting bombings, going after IRS buildings, abortion clinics, gay bars, and so on. And the U.S. government demonizing militia groups as taking part in these crimes. Now, half these crimes were all set up by the United States government and blamed on militia groups. Now, the following section highlights the reemergence of the movement, such as militia groups and patriotic groups, and they claim that newer versions of the NWO conspiracy have been concocted in order to empower the movement. The NWO is seen as using law enforcement, military, National Guard, and federal agencies in order to carry out its elitist one-world government. Law enforcement and military forces are believed to be utilized in order to confiscate firearms and place individuals into FEMA concentration camps. And as you just seen, yes, this is not rhetoric or conspiracy. They do confiscate American citizens' firearms. And in the next section, we're going to get into the proof that, yes, there are FEMA camps here in America, and this is not conspiracy. In this section, they highlight that you are the enemy. And they say that the militia subscribes to anti-government and anti-New World Order mindset, which creates a threat to law enforcement officers. They view the military, National Guard, and law enforcement as a force that will confiscate their firearms and place them into FEMA concentration camps. The classified and controversial Rex 84, here we have HR 645 back in 2009 was established to establish FEMA internment camps here in the United States. Now you have Army Field Manual FM 3-39.40. It's called the Internment and Resettlement Operations for internment camps. We have Army Regulations 210-35, which is the Civilian Inmate Labor Program. In this field manual, it classifies that it's for civilian prison camps here in America on Army installations. Here you have the New York Times reporting how Halliburton gets a contract to add temporary immigration detention centers here in America. Not only for immigrants, but also for American citizens as well. You have GoArmy.com advertising for jobs for internment specialists. Also, how they highlight job duties and requirements as detaining and housing American citizens and POWs on American soil. There are many names for these camps: re-education camps, internment camps, resettlement camps, and so on. But this is what the government says. This is rhetoric and conspiracy theory. And as you just seen, no, this is not rhetoric, this is not conspiracy, because not only it's in legislation, but Army field manuals as well.